Excellencies, distinguished delegates and panelists here, dear friends, good afternoon. I thank you for coming today to this side event, which is an opportunity to reflect upon the recent visit of Pope Francis to the United Nations and to ponder what he said during his address to the General Assembly. Pope Francis stated that he hoped his words would be taken above all as a continuation of the words Pope Paul VI said 50 years ago this week, which he stressed remain ever timely. Paul VI, in the first papal address ever to the UN in 1965, said that the appeal to the moral conscience of man has never been as necessary as it is today, because the real dangers threatening the human person come ultimately not from progress or science, but from the way we choose to use them, either for good or for ill. The real danger, Paul VI emphasized, comes from man, who has at his disposal ever more powerful instruments that are as well fitting to bring about ruin as they are to achieve lofty conquests. 12 days ago, Pope Francis came here to continue and intensify this appeal to our moral consciences. Celebrating the 70th anniversary of the UN, he said that the experience of these last 70 decades is a tale of great achievements and sad failures. At its best, he said, the United Nations has been a light that has helped dispel the darkness of the disorder caused by unrestrained ambitions and collective forms of selfishness. When the full application of international norms are applied with transparency and sincerity, without ulterior motives, according to the principles of justice, it has led to peace and development. When, on the other hand, international norms are not enforced, when they are reduced to a declarationist nominalism that mollifies our consciences but achieves little, or when they are manipulated as instruments to be followed only when they are to individual advantage, national or geopolitical interest, the Pope said they become a true Pandora's box and have occasioned great damage and sufferings. And so Pope Francis came to echo Pope Paul VI's appeal to awaken our consciences and make them courageous and consequential. One of the most important principles of conscience, Pope Francis described, is justice, giving each person his due, recognizing that everyone has rights, and placing limits in the temptation to aggrandize control and power. But he added that according to the classical definition, justice is the constant and perpetual will to give each one his due. Justice is therefore not just a theory. It is something that is practical, persevering, and effective. For us to be just and conscientious leaders and servants of the good of nations, we need therefore tenaciously to press on to seek urgently needed and effective solutions to the endemic or epidemic problems that plague us today. We need especially to recognize, said Pope Francis, that war is the greatest injustice of all, what he called the negation of all rights, and strive with all our energies to save our generation and future generations from the scourge of war every way we can, through integral and sustainable development, through the protection and promotion of our environment, through the enforcement of international law and treaties, through peacemaking and peace building, and through forming a culture based on communion and cooperation rather than distrust and the fear of mutually assured destruction. In his September 25 address, Pope Francis appealed to our consciences, especially on this point, about the choice we need to make between an ethics and a law based on the threat of mutual destruction and possibly the destruction of all mankind. an ethics that seeks to unite nations by fear and distrust, and an ethics of fraternity and solidarity. As Paul VI said a half-century ago, the greatest danger comes from man, who can use science and technology for ruin or for achievement. Pope Francis has suggested that the more we have such weapons in our hands, the more a culture is created and consciences form based on potentially using them. And therefore, the Pope stressed, there is an urgent need to work for a world free of nuclear weapons in full application of the Non-Proliferation Treaty in letter and spirit, with the goal of a complete prohibition of nuclear weapons. The future demands of us, Pope Francis underlined, critical and global decisions in the face of worldwide conflicts that increase the number of the excluded and those in need. The world today demands of us urgently needed effective solutions, and Pope Francis is calling us. He is challenging our consciences to have the constant and perpetual will to help create the culture of justice, solidarity, and fraternity. Today, I'm very happy that we have three speakers who will help us to understand and apply Pope Francis' summons with regards to the need to work together to work for a world free of nuclear weapons. We have here, and I am honored to welcome His Excellency Mr. Kim Won-soo, Undersecretary General and High Representative for Disarmament Affairs at the United Nations, who will be sharing his thoughts from the perspective of his new position he assumed at the beginning of June. But of course, he is a UN veteran. And I am also pleased to welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. and Senator Douglas Roche, author, parliamentarian, diplomat, passionate promoter of peace and security through disarmament, and for more than 2 decades, a collaborator of the Permanent Mission of the Holy See to the United Nations. He was Canada's ambassador for disarmament to the UN from 1984 to 88, and he was the chairman of the Committee on Disarmament in 1988, and he was a parliamentarian of Canada, and he has just published his 21st book, so it's like a library, which he will introduce tomorrow at the UN bookstore at 1 o'clock. For those who want a copy of the book, I got it for free. He will sign it for you. And today he will be sharing with us the fruits of his reflections, 40 decades of reflections about peace and security through disarmament, connecting his reflections with the address of Pope Francis last September 25. And I am also pleased to welcome a very, very familiar face here at the UN, Dr. Jonathan Granoff, the president of the Global Security Institute, the former vice president of the NGO Committee on Disarmament Affairs, and the senior advisor of the American Bar Association's Committee on Arms Control and National Security, who will bring his many years of experience and passionate leadership in the field of disarmament. At the end of the interventions, there will be some time for questions or further reflections. Thank you once again for coming, and now I would like to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Kim Won-soo.